welcome. I'm a former high school math teacher. Been doing this for 32 years, but I'm just going to jump right in. I always start with one of my favorite quotes. To find what one is fitted to do and secure an opportunity to do that is the key to happiness. John Dewey, I think everybody that's an educator knows who John Dewey. Anybody want to guess what year he said this?
1920.
Close, 1920. I got 1920. Anybody else want to pick a year?
1960.
Close, 1911. So we've been thinking about this since 1911, right? And I always say this is as relevant today as it was in 1911. And I love this quote. How do you help students find what they're fitted to do, but yet, better yet, secure that opportunity? We kind of forget the second part. We think career exploration is go find a job you like. Our job is to help them secure that opportunity. And we really struggle with this. And our journey, Pathway to Careers, is kind of through this lens. When we started the company, it was like, how do we get on this journey? How do we really think about this? And our topic was bridging the gap between workforce and education. So I always say, let's start with how are we doing, right? So right now, 43% of our kids graduate within 6 years. That's how, so think about this in the grand, this is national. So we got a problem already, 57%, kind of wandering around out there somewhere, right? I saw your sign out there on equity. We really focus on this a lot in our company. 13% of our bottom quartile earn a degree. Think about that. Like if you want to have access to high paying jobs, our bottom quartile is batting 13%. And I can't pass a law and say, hey, you have cybersecurity skills. Yay. You actually have to have the skills. We got to back those pathways up and really develop it through education, right? Anybody ever heard the term underemployed? Everybody's shaking their head. What does it mean back there? That's correct. 41% of our current college graduates are classified as underemployed, which means they're not focused on these high wage, high growth jobs. I mean, this is a problem. It's why student loan debt's a presidential topic. It's why this stuff all flows. Georgetown did a study. 76% of college graduates said they would change their major if anyone would have shared labor market data with them. And I'm going, wow, nobody's telling them, you will not get a job in this. You are not going to make any money. And they're graduating, right? So we know this. I mean, again, these are quick slides. I'll run through a couple of these really quick. Worker shortage. This is interesting. First time this is happening. Those that are over 65, under 19, we're about to meet in the middle from a population. So when you think about workers and employment, this is all like front and center. 9 years in a row, according to the Chamber of Commerce, businesses have ranked the available workforce the #1 issue they face, right? I'm sure you guys hear this, right? I always say there's this craziness. Business blames education. We get mad at businesses. I've been doing this a long time, right? And you kind of go through this weird cycle. Our job at Pathway to Careers is we kind of want to break this cycle. We want to jump in the middle of this conversation. So, by the way, I love this. This was done by ACT a couple years ago. They surveyed high school teachers and said, hey, do you have your kids ready? I want to call this slide perception versus reality. Majority of our high school teachers said, yep, we did a great job. They surveyed higher ed and said, were they ready? 26% of higher ed said they were ready. Now let's jump over to higher ed. I always say, well, let's not let higher ed off the hook. Higher ed, do you have kids ready for the workforce? They are very confident. They've done their job. 96% of higher ed believe they've got kids ready for the workforce. What did our businesses say? 11. Again, got this problem, right? And we've heard this for a long time. I mean, those that have been in education a long time, go back to the SCANS report from the 80s. High skills, low wages was a major initiative. So again, that's what you see. That's how we're doing. So how does Pathway to Careers kind of jump into this, right? How do we actually start coming up with actionable things we can do to tackle this? So we believe that when education becomes relevant, learners are fully engaged. I really believe it's a crisis of engagement. How do we get people engaged, right? Teachers, students, engagement leads to motivation, motivation leads to performance. And so we looked at this very carefully. We've been thinking about career-connected learning for a long time. What does it really look like when we do this? And we're going to very quickly hit on it. So first, we want to map all the jobs to every school district. So you have trends, what's happening Do you understand that? We just call it Labor Market Navigator. How do we give you the tool? What are the jobs? What's my trends? What should I be thinking about within my community? Second, we started doing career exploration and math. I'll tell the story. We won a couple big federal grants to reimagine academic learning in a completely different way. So let's dive into it. So again, motivation, once their students become relevant, fully engaged, leads to motivation, which leads to performance, right? And how do I know this? I'm a researcher at heart. Give a student purpose. How many CTE people are in here that run CTE? So I know we've got a couple, right? We know this from CTE, right? Give a kid purpose, what happens? Every CTE program in the country graduates in a high 90%. I think nationwide it's like 96% of CTE students graduate high school, right? Versus 80% across the whole spectrum. And I think it's because they have purpose. Look what happens when a student has purpose. More motivated to learn, I'm more engaged, I persist, I retain. By the way, this isn't my opinion. This research would fill this room. Goal is, how do you give a kid purpose? How do you do it all the time? Which gets really hard. By the way, one of my favorite stats that's not in here, CTE students that go to college, remember that slide? What was the percent that graduate college right now? It's in the 40%, right? Does anybody know the CTE college completion rate statistic?
90.
It's 80. So our CTE students, when they go to college, outperform those kids we spend a lot of energy saying we're going to get you to college by twice, right? Think about that for a minute. And I could make an argument, you don't even spend a lot of time telling CTE students to go to college, right? We're focused on their pathway and their outcome, right? And again, we know this. I think people know this intuitively. This is one of my favorite research studies ever done. I always talk about this. It was done by the National Dropout Prevention Network. Love it. They were looking at kids in peril, and we all have seen them. I was a former high school teacher. What are we doing for those kids? I hate school. How many times you heard a kid say, I hate school, I don't want to be here, I'm bored to death? Like, I can't stand it, right? So what are we doing to keep them engaged and motivated? National Dropout, largest study ever done. And by the way, so what they were studying was, where should we spend our time and energy to help these kids? What scored dead last on this chart? Where do we spend all of our money? Time, energy. We spend it all on academics, right? What scores dead last? I tell people and I hope nobody's doing this because I've gotten in trouble by saying this before, I hear the term double block in math and I cringe. Let's take a kid who hates math and our solution is you get to do it twice. How's that going to work out for that kid? And actually what we're going to do is we're really going to make them hate math because we're taking them out of something they probably actually like in order to double block them, right? And so when you think about this, by the way, everything on this chart, everything scores higher than academics. Literally everything, work-based learning. But what's number one? Get a kid to believe they have a future via a career. You have an 81% chance on that kid. That's an amazing outcome. I tell people, we can keep taking the long way, which is 11%. It's a long journey for performance improvement. That is a long journey. Or we can increase that times 8. That's an amazing outcome. It's a great study. They've got some great correlations in this study. So when we think about it, pathway to careers, we think about it, education that leads to employment, benefits your local economy, and how are we doing it for the kids that need it the most? So the federal government 4 years ago put out a project. And they said, we want somebody to do something different, anybody. And they challenged people to redo an academic subject, they didn't care which one, and do it through the lens of a career. And my partner was the state of New Mexico. So we partnered with the entire state of New Mexico, and they're dead last in math, something they're not proud of. I think they're 49th in math. And they said, let's do math. And I said, okay, let's tackle this really hardcore. It was the #1 funded project in the country. At the time. We've got multiple evaluations on it, but let's talk about why. Are you trying to have your students conform to your current instructional strategies? Are we trying to change our instructional strategies for the kids today? It's a really deep, profound question. You really got to think about that. We keep trying to do it the old way, right? I laugh because every state has high quality instructional review. Every state does these processes. I'm like, well, how's this been really working out? I've got 30 years worth of data on some of these outcomes now. And so what we wanted to do is go to that latter question. How do we change the instruction based upon what research says and what we can do for students? And so we said, what's the number one question kids have been asking for hundreds of years? When am I ever going to, you guys heard that in your classrooms? When am I ever going to use this, right? We hear this all the time, right? And my goal was they're never going to ask that when they're in a P2C lesson. We're going to answer that. That was goal number one. We have to change this instruction. It's 2025. We owe these kids an answer. When am I going to use this and how does it apply to me, right? So we started with that. By the way, a couple things. We used Understanding by Design, Wiggins and McGee. Again, really focused on that career-connected learning idea of a theory. So what's it look like? What do we know about engagement? 80% of our kids in elementary school say they're engaged. We lose half by high school. You guys are familiar with education. What do we do in elementary school to keep kids engaged? Yell it out. What do we do? What?
Play.
Play. You move a little bit. That helps. What else are you doing? Think about it for a minute. You're typically working in teams. You're working on real world. It's not abstract. You're doing a lot of hands-on stuff, right? It's critical thinking. By the way, if you were to list this and I were to do a survey of business and ask them what they wanted, you know what they want? They kind of want what we do in elementary school. Teams, critical thinking, problem solving, everything can't become abstract. And what happens in learning, it becomes very abstract. By the way, this is our performance in math. The new NAEP scores came out on Monday. I don't know if anybody saw them, but anybody want to give me a definition for this line? Stagnant? Flat's a good one. It's 30 years worth of data on math performance. We can keep doing it. I tell everybody all the time, traditional method that we've been doing around math looks like this, right? And we get very, very marginal outcomes. The new NAEP scores that came out on Monday, the biggest finding was one group did good on the new NAEP scores, and it's our high-performing, high SES kids. Is that our problem in education? No. 67% of our low-income kids scored minus 30%. And the gap's getting worse. And so when you look at a chart like this, we can keep doing it, right? If it was about math, Pearson should have fixed this problem. They've been doing it for a long time. Houghton Mifflin, insert name, right? You guys been seeing these companies forever. I do not think it's about math. I think it's about engagement. How are we talking with these kids? How are we changing that instruction? By the way, this is our equity gap. Non-changing, flat. I mean, these are, like I say as a passionate educator, this is what lights my hair on fire. This should bother us. Really deep down should make us a little bit frustrated. We have to help these kids. 13% of these kids are getting degrees, which means they don't have access to high-paying jobs, right? We have to back the system up. So, by the way, these were the new NAEP scores. The one thing that is interesting, 67% of our kids were below proficiency. The low income was a minus 26%. Horrible. So what did we do? We jumped into the middle of this and said we're going to make math less abstract, more meaningful, provide purpose, demonstrate how math is useful, and we're going to do it in authentic ways. John Hopkins did a study a few years ago and said, students, this will shock us, but students are pretty smart, and they know when we're making it up. And students can delineate between what they think is an authentic lesson and a non-authentic. And John Hopkins says they can now measure that effect size. And I'm thinking when we make it, and so we wanted to be very authentic in our approach. How do we help kids think about this critically, right? So what's it look like? So easy way of describing it, we put 650 careers inside of math. Every math lesson starts with a career. So when you think about the term career-connected learning, like how do we put careers inside of math and merge it into one? So far we've done pre-algebra, 8th grade, algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2. I've been on this journey for about 4 years. It's when we won the grant. They liked it so much, the federal government called us last year and said, hey, would you like to do 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade? And so we just won a second grant to go down to lower grade levels. But we're thinking about that differently too. Like how do we think through how to help a student that has these huge skill gaps at these lower grade levels, right? But let me give you an example of what it looks like. So this is an example of our table of contents. We tried to focus on high wage, high growth jobs. So every lesson, we're going to pull in labor market data. How much money can you make? Where's this job at? And we're going to tie it to your local economy. So when they're inside a lesson, they're seeing data. Oh, today I'm a carpenter. I'm in Minnesota. This is how much money I can make as I learn about angles. Line 2, specific state standards. In fact, we just finished Minnesota standards. So we've just mapped everything and correlated it to Minnesota. And we'll show it to you. So again, some quick examples. Here's 2 quick examples of what it looks like when you do that, right? You're looking at a lesson on applying graphs of proportional relationships, but I want you to notice before I teach math, what are we doing? We're saying, hey, today you get to be a manufacturing engineer. How much money can you make? Where am I going to work? Potential employers, and we're showing you all of that. Next day I could be a carpenter. By the way, we surveyed in New Mexico 6,000 students. Carnegie Mellon was one of our evaluators. They surveyed 6,000 students. After one lesson, 82% of our students said they wanted to learn math this way. Like one lesson, I had 82% engagement. That's pretty cool. 2 lessons in, I go to 100% engagement. Took me 2 lessons to get every student engaged in math. And it's not because we wrote a better math problem. I wish. We did write a good math problem, but we got students highly engaged and motivated, and then that starts to happen. My favorite story is a teacher called me one day. She said, I got a problem. Renee here, she was doing this math lesson, but now she wants to go do that job. What am I supposed to do? And I was like, hey, wait a minute. You just won the lottery. If your student was doing a math lesson and they're so excited by the math, they now want to pursue that as a career, you won big, right? That's called autonomy. It's what we want in education, right? And this is something I thought was fascinating from our research. We asked students, do you want to learn about a career? We think career exploration, I always say the problem with career exploration right now, we treat it as this one-time event. Like you're going to log on and you're going to find a job because we bought this system. And we're going to do it for 1 week a year. I know states that literally do it 1 week a year. I think we should do it all the time. And we can do it through academic learning. Because we never know that trigger that's going to ignite the passion for learning. And by the way, 91% of our kids said, as they're going through math, they want to learn about these careers. This is through an algebra classroom. That's super cool, right? One of the things we saw on the back end of our data, I think they saw a 40% increase in students enrolling in CTE. These kids don't know. They don't know how much money they can make in some of these jobs. They're going, hey, wait a minute, I can do that and be done in a year, year and a half and make that kind of money? Yeah, I want to go do that. They saw same type of increase in students wanting to pursue STEM as a career. Everybody's chasing this magic thing. How do we get more kids in STEM? For good reason. There's lots of jobs, opportunities. But again, we're just doing it through math. And they saw a 40–50% increase in students saying, I want to do STEM, right? So that's what it kind of looks like. By the way, this is a quantile measure that Metametrics did. So they were looking at our data, and they're independent from us, and they said, how did you possibly get these huge gains in Hatch Valley, New Mexico? Remember, New Mexico's the lowest performing state in the country. Hatch is one of the worst performing schools in the state of New Mexico. And in one semester, they're posting 120, 150 point gains. Again, what does engagement look like? Remember that slide on purpose? You guys see it in CT. Give a kid purpose, good things happen. We're just trying to do it across the board through general education. This was a RCT study we did to where they were trying to measure outcomes in a control versus a non-control environment. About a 10% improvement in geometry scores and a 13% in algebra. Remember our flat test scores? How many people would like to see a 13% improvement in algebra scores? Right? It's pretty cool, right? And again, it's all about that engagement and motivation. How do we push that? All right, let's jump on and show it. We're going to go around to our career-connected learning suite. So we're going to start with how do we help policy people and adults? How do we help you understand your community and where these trends are? Then we're going to lead it over to the student side. So we're going to literally go around our wheel really fast. So how do we help you as policy people? And so this is a project we're doing here in the Twin Cities with Tom and the Boys and Girls Club. And our goal here was simple. How do we take what is historically complicated, make it really easy? Labor market data is everywhere. You get all these reports all the time telling you what to do. Our goal was to streamline it package it, and just give it to you. And now I can make really good, effective decisions. I don't need to worry about where the data came from. So it's going to shock you, but your area is going to do exactly that. It's going to describe your area. So we were very explicit in our language. So let's click on your area. Click down this drop down. Every school district that funnels students into that Boys and Girls Club, we can map the data very specifically to them. Okay? So all you got to do is find my school district. I don't care which one you find. And our first goal here is, how do we just describe what you look like? What does your community look like in a dashboard? So very quickly, we'll scroll down. I've got my school district, I've got my community, I've got my gender, I've got my population, I'm going to have my race and my ethnicity. Remember one of the things we said early on, the 4 E's, education, employment, economic development, and equity. So how do we give you those data lenses into your community? So this is dashboard, population by education. That's one of your leading indicators of economic development. Companies moving in, first thing they're going to pull, what kind of skills exist here? How do I think about that? So we're giving you this in a dashboard feel. Where do people typically work in this community? What's my labor shed? We can give you some commuting patterns, tell you where people work, what direction they drive. Again, think of it as a dashboard. And then at the bottom, we're going to dive into education speak. So here are your 16 clusters. There are now, how many new clusters just came out? 14. The national framework just changed, right? But right now, you're looking at your clusters. So in this community, what's the most job openings? A lot of job openings in hospitality and tourism. What's my median wage? Now, if I wanted to change that, I just go up to median wage and click it. And now I can sort. And by the way, no surprise, #1 high-paying job in this area is STEM. Right? So now I've done this presentation a million times. I've never not seen STEM #1 on wages. Might not be #1 on growth and total number of jobs, but it's always #1 on wages. So if I'm a superintendent and I need to open, by the way, I was a school board president. I do not recommend it. I'm off. I did not run for re-election. Thank God. I'm done with that. I did it for 6 years. I will not do it again. But we built a STEM academy, and I use this data. I said, why are we building a STEM academy? Well, do you want your kids to work here? Or do you want them in that hospitality? And I'm not picking on hospitality, but I'm pretty sure parents would look at that data and go, yeah, I want my kid to make an average of $106,000. Now, this is your dashboard, a lot we can do with it. Now, I want a deeper dive, so let's go on to STEM. So now I'm giving you the 16 career clusters, but let's say I really wanted to build that STEM academy. Now I'm going to scroll down to STEM and say, well, I need all the data. That's not going to help me. Now I can look at all of the STEM data about occupation mapped to my district. Is that making sense to everybody, how we're doing this? So now I've got all my data by my clusters, and I can look at it and I can think about it critically. So now if I want, again, I can find my district and I can scroll down and I've got all of the data. You'll see everything by pathway, occupation, openings. Now I'm getting my detail. So now I'm ready to go do something with it. Let's do something real quick. There's 2 pages of STEM jobs, right? So I can export that, I can do something with it, but go up back to the top and change my cluster where it says STEM, change it to hospitality and tourism. I'm going to show you guys something. This is the power of what we're trying to help you. So scroll down, lots of jobs. In fact, I got 2 pages of jobs in hospitality and tourism, right? Let's go back up there. See that little button that says high value? Click it. So Perkins 5 asked you guys as policy people to think very critically about high wage, high growth, right? How are we thinking? If I click high value and I click go, what we're going to do is we're going to help you out, and we're going to sort it by what Perkins 5 asked every school district to do. So click it. Now scroll down. We went from 2 pages of jobs to 5. So what the federal government is asking you to think about is where should we be investing our monies based upon high wage, high growth for our kids? We just eliminated 2/3 of the jobs because they're not classified as high wage, high growth. So we're trying to help you out by giving you the tools. We're pulling all your publicly available data. Again, our goal, what was the goal #1 with this? Take what's complicated, make it easy. All we're trying to do is serve it up to you to say, what decisions can I make now as a district, right? What should we be doing, and how do we take this data and make better effective decisions? All of this is that career connected learning model. Okay, that's Labor Market Navigator. So now we're going to transition and we're going to become a student. So, and at the center of everything we do is this labor market data, right? Everything we want to do is about that labor market data. How does it set in the center and feed all of our systems? So when a student logs on, you'll notice I got a career spotlight, then I got my classes, but every time they log on, we can simulate a new career spotlight. And part of that is to keep them engaged. So click on Pathway to Careers up at the top. Every time I log on, we're simulating, I'm logging on. So I've got a job and we're just pulling random jobs. So go ahead and click it again. So every time I log on, part of that engagement, so as a student, I could stop and go, hey, wait a minute. I would like to learn more about $132,000, right? As a medium salary in Minnesota. So go ahead and click on Learn More. So a student, before they can take their algebra classroom, they can go into what I call career exploration mode, right? I'm thinking about this right now. And I'm looking at it, and I can see my wages here. Job Zone 5, which tells me it needs an advanced degree. And so now if you scroll down, we're going to tell you everything about requirements, interest, and values. So we can take an assessment to see how well I correlate to this. By the way, we won 2 federal grants. We won them at the same time. Grant number 1 was math. Grant number 2 was how do you reimagine career exploration in an effective way. By the way, when the federal government put that out, they put out a grant and they said, I'm quoting the feds, not Joseph, but I do love quoting them on this. They hate all the career exploration systems on the market. Could somebody do something different and new? I know why we won, and I'll show it to you. And they awarded 1 project in the country, and we won it. It was how do you merge academics and career exploration into one idea? Again, a lot of tools on the career exploration side that we're not going to have time to dive into, but I can map all of that as a student. Click on preparation. Again, you'll see a lot here. So again, a student can even take, what is my return on my investment? I want to go to this college, it's going to cost me this much. Here, what's my return on that? Lots of tools I'm kind of skipping over. Go back to the home page now. So that, by the way, they can bookmark that. They can save it to their portfolio. They have a My Career page that builds everything out. One of the reasons why we won that federal grant was right here. Click on career exploration. So we made an argument or a theory to the federal government. Nobody teaches career exploration. We think it's like, hey, Tom, go find a job you like and do this, right? Without a structured approach. We went back and we started in grade 6 and we built a curriculum, grade 6 through 12, on how to facilitate these conversations as if I'm teaching any content. So, and again, we've pre-built the lessons. And so, again, I've got my entire table of contents here. And not only are we trying to teach this, but we're also trying to get it away from your school counselors. Not because we don't like school counselors, but the ratio of school counselors is, I don't know what it is in Minnesota, but it's about 500 to 1. They're not getting to this. In fact, surveys of most school counselors, this is dead last on their priority list. How do you focus on careers, mapping with students? They're worried about college, paperwork, and all of that other structure that overwhelms them. What we said was, how do we get career exploration into every classroom? So we put it within standards of ELA. So can I get your ELA teacher to do it twice a year? Can I get your science teacher to do it twice a year? Your social studies, you know what? You know who benefits? Your kids are getting it 15, 20 times a year. Kind of cool. How do you create a seabed change on this topic, right? So that's why we won the federal grant. Tools are everywhere in these systems. We wanted to say systematically, how do you teach it? So under, you'll see financial literacy at the very bottom. We just finished this, and this was mapped out on the national standards. We worked with American Public Education Foundation on the national standards on designing a financial literacy course, right? And so again, table of contents will break down everything we're teaching, but all of those tools are embedded in that career exploration, okay? So let's jump into a math lesson real quick. I got 7 minutes. Questions so far? Again, lots of career exploration sets around it. So when I told that story about the student who left a math lesson and now he's clicking on the career exploration saying, okay, how do I get there? That's what you want, right? You want that interconnectivity. I laugh because there's this big debate of what career connected learning is. I think we're past it. Like, this is what it looks like. You merge academics and careers into one idea. They're not separate. So we're going to jump into geometry real quick. Just for time's sake, we're going to jump into chapter 2. And one of the things you'll notice in chapter 2, by the way, we will always tell you the standards. And we'll also tell you what career is inside of that lesson, right? So as you're looking at this, we went down to using theorems about angles, and we're going to be a carpenter today. And so if I click on that, you'll notice it's digital. I'm on as a student, and so I can start the lesson. So we're using theorems about angles. We are always going to start with the engagement piece first. We're always going to walk them through what a carpenter does, and we're going to push that right up front. So what's a carpenter do? We're going to make sure they're wise. I always say, how do we help students? We love the term career ready, right? But how do we help students become career engaged, career wise, and career ready? We kind of left the first two off. And that's why we have 41% of our kids that are classified as underemployed that are college graduate. We left off the career wise. You got to show them this stuff. How much money can you make? What's the job market? Scroll down. So as I'm doing this, we're showing you the pathway, my cluster. But here, those little pluses, those are direct from the skills that a carpenter does from ONET. So when you're doing career exploration, it says, what did they do, the task? Well, we've integrated it inside of a math lesson. So now you're integrating career exploration inside academic learning, and you're having the student understand that process. As I scroll down, we'll tell you what education is required. We will always map the labor market data based upon your account, Minnesota. So they're always going to see that. I got asked the question the other day by a school, and they were like, what happens when that data becomes negative? And I'm like, well, we're telling the student that is a negative growth job. I can't control it, right? I tell everybody we built it originally, high wage, high growth. Well, it's going to change. I won't always be able to say that. Eventually, I'm going to be in a community that job is not growing. But again, how do we make sure they know that up front? Keep going down. So again, this is all part of my engagement. What's my salary? In some cases, I think next we'll introduce them to a video. This video is from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. What does a carpenter do? Notice we haven't done math yet. After that, we're going to click continue. And in some cases, we've gone out and found local people that have these jobs, and we're mapping it to the student. You don't remember, I'm sure you won't remember, but remember that national dropout prevention chart? 81% was careers. If you remember, there was one called 64%, and it was mentorship. Get an adult to talk to a kid about their career journey to get a 64% effect size. I'm just trying to put that in here to get another 64% effect size. Got the 81, how do I throw in a 64% now, right? Let's keep maximizing that learning protocol. So a lot of local people, I think we've recorded over 300 so far. Our new project that we won in New Mexico, they asked us to find 100 students that have had a disability that now have a successful career. So now they're going to have people that have had disabilities that have found their way to a successful career. They're 5-7 minutes long, but they're that engagement, push engagement, motivation. Now we got to make the transition to math. So now we got to connect the career to the actual math. So we're going to say, hey, today you're learning about being a carpenter. We got to learn about angles. In fact, just jump to step into the career. That's fine. So you'll notice we start using phrases like step into the career. That's where we're going to model it. And so we're given an exemplar. So if I step into the career, we're saying, here's a table, you're a carpenter. How do you understand your angles, right? Obviously, this table would fall down if we didn't understand angles, right? Simple math problem, but we're using words like, hey, Tom, step into the career today. We're going to model this. Now, when I go to do my homework, there's one over there called on the job. So we're using very explicit language to trigger the student. Hey, you have to go on the job now. This is your homework. Now you're going to practice that skill. We end every lesson with a formative measure to measure the learning at the very end, to where we want to measure that outcome of what happened in that lesson. All right, I got 1 minute. Thoughts, questions from the group? Thank you very much.